Hello, everyone. So we're going to do a quick introduction. Can everyone see the correct screen on here?
We can.
Perfect. Okay. So my name is Julie Trich, and this is my co-founder, Emily Adams of Transformative Leadership. You guys will also see on the call Haley Wilson. Haley Wilson is part of our team. She is our cultural innovation specialist. She won't be presenting with us today, but she will be here and available for questions at the end. If there's anything that pops up in the chat that she can answer, she'll probably be doing that throughout. So if you do see any answers or anything from Haley, that's why. Okay, so we'll do just a super quick intro. Emily, I'll let you introduce yourself real quick and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, Emily Adams, from a career standpoint, have been in the automotive industry for over a decade, transitioned into software, and then later we decided to start transformative leadership. We won't go into the backstory of how we met and how me and Julie, I was not Julie's favorite person. We'll just leave it at that. But now we are business partners, and I'm super excited just to be here. And I appreciate all of you guys jumping on this call.
Yeah, so like Emily said, we met in the automotive manufacturing industry. I do like to make that distinction. We found out pretty early on that to a lot of people that just means like car dealerships and that type of thing, and that's not us. Um, so we met in the automotive manufacturing industry. We worked for a tier two and tier three, tier one, tier two, and tier three supplier. Um, and we worked with very large companies in our former lives before we decided to team up and create transformative leadership. And that was basically birthed out of two things that we saw within that industry. One thing was they do things in that industry so beautifully and in such a way that you don't see in a lot of industries. And what I mean by that is like the problem solving techniques that they use and the way that they develop really, really robust processes. So, from a business and structural standpoint, they do an amazing job with that. And we see that that's lacking in a lot of businesses, especially when they're ready to grow and scale or if they're new startups and things like that. The other like part of this coin, I would say, is the leadership aspect. So, just to be completely frank and blunt with all of you, it's non-existent for the most part within the industry, and it is a very like dog eat dog survival of the fittest. We actually used to kind of make bets on when other supervisors and people would leave, like how long we would bet each other lunch on how long people would stay. To be quite honest with you guys. So we are going to teach you guys today. I know it's called holistic tracking through KPIs, and we're going to explain to you guys what that is. But we just wanted to give you a quick background of who we are and how we got started and how we got into this. So today we're going to talk to you about how to save millions through holistic tracking, how to achieve operational excellence and employee alignment. So what is holistic tracking? I know most people, when they think of tracking, they think of their key performance indicators. And especially if you're looking at like a marketing, not a marketing standpoint, but a manufacturing standpoint, you're looking at like how many parts are you building per hour? How many, customers, what's your throughput and different things like that. So really you're looking at the very like nuts and bolts of the business, right? You're looking very much at ROI. You're looking very much at like, what's my throughput to my customer? What is my profitability looking like and different things like that. So when it comes to holistic tracking, we look at also leadership effectiveness. So one thing that we've seen throughout our experience in the industry and even since we've been at it, because it's really in every industry, but the effectiveness of your leadership directly affects your bottom line. What do I mean by that? Turnover, right? The ability for people to say, what, that's why we had such high turnover when we were in manufacturing, is because the leadership was not there. It was completely sink or swim. It was, and I promise you that what they teach you in school, I know we've got a couple Ivy leaders on the call today, so what they teach you in school does not directly translate to what you see in the actual workforce and where you're working. I remember having a very visceral oh shit moment of like, what did I land myself into? Because this is not at all how it's supposed to be, right? So the effectiveness of your leadership and your ability to be led and to develop yourself are huge, right? team dynamics are another huge thing that when you look at, I could tell you stories for days about team members that I worked with and or worked for me that were constantly a pain, constantly a problem. And so you really have to look at the team dynamics, right? Like me as a leader, what am I doing to bring out the best in this person? Or what am I not doing that is bringing out these pieces in them that are not good for our bottom line or are not good for our team dynamic overall, right? And so these are things that are missed quite often in organization and in business is that, again, we're just looking at how much money are we making? How much money are we losing? Where can we shore up our processes? And are we meeting our KPIs or not? There's not a lot of focus on the team and the team development because I had a supervisor one time say, oh, I don't think that this person could ever be a supervisor, someone that worked for them on the floor, right? They're like, they're not supervisor material. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Did you give them a chance? They want to come and they want to be developed. Are you giving them that chance, right? So that's some of the things that we look at with the team dynamics. And then when we talk about organizational success, I'm 1,000,000% a believer that an organization is only as successful as every individual person in the organization. So if you have high overachievers in your, or high achievers in your organization, and you keep dumping work, I used to do this family. I would put work on her, put work on her, and another person because I knew that they could take it, right? I knew I didn't have to babysit, I didn't have to hold their hands, and I could be successful by doing that. Was that fair to those people? No. Should I have spent more time developing the other people? Yeah. So that's what we say, like we mean when we say organizational success is you have to develop everyone on the team. You can't just pick your rock stars and your all stars and give them all of the things because they're going to get overwhelmed every single time. And then they'll end up leaving, which is not what you want. So that's why this matters, right? When we're tracking operational KPIs, that's great. We need to have those. If you don't have them, that's an issue, right? Or if your KPIs aren't getting you the results that you want, you definitely want to look at those. But you also need to make sure that you have human-centric metrics to bridge that gap. Because if you aren't looking at the human, they will leave you. If you aren't looking at the human, then I can tell you so many times you have employees that have so much more potential and can do so much more, but either they're not listened to, they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel like their opinion matters, and they're just here to make a buck and they don't care how they do it, right? So you can have people that want to cause downtime or that cause disruption so they don't have to work because they're dissatisfied with the environment that they're in. And so if we want to look at some real quick statistics, so you have disengaged employees, like I was just talking about, and the cost for US companies, that's $550 billion, billion with a B annually, right? From having disengaged and disgruntled employees. So this is huge. And I think most people don't realize the depth and the brevity. And then oftentimes big corporations can think, oh, I can just replace them, right? Well, if you're not solving the root cause, if you're not getting rid of the issue that created it in the first place, then it's just going to keep happening, as you see with these statistics, right? So companies with high employee engagement are 21% more profitable. So for those of you who have worked in a large corporation before, maybe have a large corporation now, think about what your bottom line is right now and then add 21% to that. That's what you're missing out on right now if your employees are not engaged, okay? So now I'm going to hand it over to Emily, and she is going to go over the next couple slides of a very specific and detailed endeavor that we've been on before.
Thank you, Julie. So just to kind of kick things off, funny story, when I posted this webinar, I actually had a DM saying, can you really save millions? And my response was, yeah, actually, I've done it multiple times. And the way I can say this and say it confidently is because there's a process to it. There's a practice to it. And with all the tools that we teach, these were a lot of the tools that we learned in automotive and that we still teach today. So I wanted to walk you through this example. I'm not going to mention the company because this is recorded, and give you an example of like real life, what does holistic tracking look like, how I implemented it, and the effect it had. So I was told, hey, you have to do a headcount reduction. You need to do 1.5 million. No resources were given. This is your target. Go make it happen. And the target originally was to cut headcount off of the manufacturing floor. So I knew that I was cutting jobs, and this did not sit well with me at all. And this was also like one of my gifts that I love that I have is the creativity to think outside of the box. Where can I go and what can I look at so I don't affect somebody's daily life? That it just didn't sit well with my soul. So when I looked at a head count, because I managed the budget clearly and all the head counts, I started looking at where are the gaps at? Where can we look at? What are the KPIs that we're doing? And started putting a process together to bring this back into being able to cut 1.5 million. And we started with like some of the challenges was the headcount tracking was non-existent. There was like a high number out here from like a division and plant perspective, but not all the way down to a department level to be held at that account. And when we took a deep dive into this, some of these departments were heavy on headcounts, were heavy. Like they were like 10, 20 people heavy. And that's a huge cost. So if you put numbers and you figure, they're 80,000 a piece a year, that's a lot from a revenue aspect. So we started implementing the headcount tracking and then looking at the revenue loss for just from like the headcount management. There was not a whole lot of management. There wasn't audits being done. And at the same time, I had to cut this headcount and also not hit production or quality. So you need to cut costs. This is your goal. Don't hit production and don't hit quality because we just couldn't be able to take the hit there. So one of the things that I came up with when we look at from a holistic perspective and tracking was one, how do we track this all the way down to making sure every single head count, and this was massive. There was like 3,000 people in the plant. Every single head count is accounted for. And then how do I go about making the decision to cut where I'm going to get cut at? And I went back to what didn't sit right with me as a human was to be able to cut today's jobs. So I looked in the future for the next like year or two and looked at the new stuff that was going to come in and the head count we had projected to bring in. And that's where I started making my cuts. And that also goes back to like why I'm a believer as when you go to cut headcount and you cut current headcount, that can really hurt your production and your quality. But when you think outside of the box and you also see it from like a human aspect, and we don't want to cut these jobs, how do we in the future bring our prices, our savings now so we don't have to make these cuts? So this is just kind of an example. Some of the tracking we did through here we did it on a head count. We focused on some operational standpoint, like we had some audits done, made the engineerings do some audits through efficiency. It was a very traditional KPI tracking, like you see on this slide, where we didn't really worry about the engagement. Like we didn't really worry about employee morale. We were just like very reactive and like, what can we track to measure this to actually make sure we get this cost savings? The holistic side of KPIs would include more of an employee perspective, proactive adjustments, making sure that we track the team's alignment. So in this, one of the things that I did learn through going through this process was listening to the team, listening to the employees that were on actually doing the work. And they will tell you if you go out and listen and you make them a priority, they will tell you exactly what needs to be fixed, and you'll find a lot of cost savings right there on the production floor, right there in their day-to-day activity. A lot of times leaders don't take the time to go out, be there on the spot and ask like, what is going on? Like, how are you doing your job? How is it effective? How is it efficient? And even from just like the ergonomics of it, they may be making 30 different extra moves, but that's what they have to do to hit their numbers that they have. So when we set KPIs in a very traditional way and we're focused on only hitting our efficiency target, we don't care about, if this human over here is struggling or is having back pain or whatever because of it, that is very reactive versus actually being proactive, making sure the employees are heard. And also through this process, making sure that we're actually tracking what matters and having a measurement in place to say, we're going to track this from an employee standpoint. So whether that is a survey or whatever that may be. Can you go to the next slide? Because these are some examples. So some examples of making more of a holistic approach when you're going to cost savings is really getting employee feedback. And you can do this surveys, have employee voice boxes, and actually do something with those surveys, because a lot of companies, they'll just be like, oh, we're going to send you a survey. Nothing gets done. And then employees stop using the survey because they no longer feel seen or heard or supported by their management team. And then all of a sudden they go to Glassdoor, and now you've opened up a whole other world that you don't want to be in. So set up your KPIs to make sure, because you can prevent this. The other thing with it is team alignment with the organizational goals. Is when you are setting the KPIs, it doesn't matter who you are, what are you doing. If you're setting it with a team, make sure that that team understands and they are part of setting this KPI. I've been given multiple KPIs. Hey, here's your KPI, go do it or you don't get a raise. 1.5 million in cost savings, and your raise and promotion depends on that. Did I get the raise and the promotion? Yes. Did I hate my job and my life for a while? Yes, too. So know that you have to have an alignment, an aligned approach. And when it's aligned, you will actually get more, especially out of your high performers, because they'll be like, oh, I can totally hit this. And then they start digging into it and they see that they're hitting the KPI by a lot. They'll up that KPI. Listen, the high performers and the ones that want to perform well, they will do that work for you, but you have to build that culture. You have to make sure that this holistic perspective of KPIs, they understand it as well. It's not just about making money. And then the perception of efficiency and processes. This is huge when, and I touched a little bit on this, is like your process can be super efficient, but if you have unhappy employees, you're not going to get anywhere. They are going to cause every kind of downtime that they can, every kind of glitch, they're going to find things to make sure you don't hit your numbers because they are not happy in their process. This goes back to, we need to start as leaders treating our employees as humans, to see them, hear them, support them, and developing KPIs to support that and have that kind of culture. Can you slide to the next one? So what does success look like? So from a KPI perspective, yeah, 1.5 million saved through optimized headcount. There are a lot of savings that I have done utilizing KPIs and also seeing it from a human perspective. You can have both the operations and the human and bring them together. Reducing the inefficiency and aligning employee efforts. When you reduce the inefficiencies, your employees will tell you what the inefficiencies are. If you are listening, if you do not have that culture yet, we're going to give you some tools in the next few slides to help you start building that culture, to help you start making sure that your employees are seen, heard, and respected, and also getting them aligned with doing KPIs. KPIs should not just be something that, boom, here it is, this is your goal, now you have to run with it. It should be something that is built together and also on a human perspective. And then maintain production and quality. Of course, everybody knows this is when you track this KPI, you're always going to hit your numbers, and it's going to definitely help you increase that. But at the end of it, the human is what drives this. This is why we're so passionate in teaching being more human centric instead of just all these operational things, because we've all had those.
So before I go into the actions to implement, I do want to talk through a couple key points and just kind of reiterate them. So as Emily was talking about, like, talk to your employees. It doesn't just matter to talk to your employees if you have like a shop floor and you're in manufacturing, right? Your employees, no matter what kind of job that you have, what kind of company you have, what kind of business you're in, if they are in the day-to-day and they do the day-to-day, they know all the problems and they probably have at least 3 different ways to fix them. I can promise you. So it doesn't matter if you're running, a software company, and this is something that Emily can speak to better than I can. But it doesn't matter, like, if any time that you have a process and anytime you have people doing that process, the people who are doing the process are going to know what's going on. So to tell you just like a real quick story, when I first started in manufacturing, I actually worked on the line that I was to manage. And I worked on the line for 2 or 3 months. Um, Based on the training process that they had in place, they wanted me to be at a specific level. And then after that, no one could bullshit me on that line. No one could bullshit me on what was happening on that line. They could be like, oh yeah, I need to do this because X, Y, Z. And I'd be like, no, you don't, because that's not a real thing. Or no, you don't, because of da 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 da. And they would look at me like, oh God, she knows what she's talking about. Right. I had employees coming up to me for years afterwards and they're like, hey, I heard that you ran a four build before. I'm like, yeah. Right. And that served me really well later because when we got into a pinch with production and things like that, I literally went and ran equipment. So my people could go take a lunch, but the equipment would keep running. Right. So anything that you can do to show your employees that you're on board with them, that you have respect for them, that you're not too good to do what they do. Like if you're going to ask them to do something, you better be able to do it yourself, or you better not be above doing it yourself. Because to me, there's nothing worse than someone that's like, oh, hey, go do this. Like if I was going to ask an employee or anyone that worked for me to go scrub this toilet with this toothbrush, you better believe I'm going to be scrubbing toilets with a toothbrush right next to them, right? And that I think is the expectation. That's the expectation that I hold for myself. And I know that oftentimes people think, oh, I'm the boss or I'm the CEO and I don't have to do that or I don't need to do that. But I can tell you that that's going to go farther with your employees than a lot of the things that you're going to do. Safety and ergonomics. So I worked in safety for a stint too. And when Emily is talking about, oh, they have to do 30 different, things before they can actually produce the part. When you're looking at jobs and it's inefficient for them or it's painful for them, whether it's physically painful or it's mentally and emotionally painful, and you have a process set in place. Don't be so rigid with your process that you can't make changes, right? You always want to be evolving your processes and helping your people to evolve. And again, they're gonna work so much harder for you in the end. And Emily did touch on this one too, the goal setting with the team. Don't just set arbitrary goals for your team and then be like, hey, you need to hit these goals. I don't know how many people on this call have ever worked for someone or with someone and they gave you targets and gave you goals and you're like, well, not getting that bonus because that's not reachable, right? Like I already see some people's faces that are like, yeah, that's happened before, right? There is nothing worse than being told, oh, you have the opportunity for this beautiful bonus. And then you see what it takes to get the bonus and you're like, the shit if I do, right? Like there's nothing more like demoralizing to me than that of being given. It's like, let me dangle this cute little carrot in front of you. And oh, I'm going to also like basically be on you 24/7 to hit that target, even though it's not achievable, right? To me, there's not much else that's worse than that. So really having those conversations with your employees and building these goals together. But then the other human-centric piece of this is what do they want? Do they love their job and love their role and they're completely comfortable where they're at? Or do they one day want to be where you're at? Right? So if they want to be where you're at someday, build that plan with them, help them get there, right? Like that's the mark of a good leader. All right, so now we'll go back to the slides. I'm off my soapbox for now. So the actions that you guys can implement today. So document the processes that you have. I cannot tell you how many times we've seen processes in companies we've worked with. And they're like, oh, we have a process, but Susie knows it and she's out on Wednesday. So we're just going to have to wait until Susie gets back on Thursday, right? That's not good for your company. It's not good for your business. And it's really, really, really not good for your stakeholders, right? It's not good for your clients. If you have processes, but only one person knows how to do them. So if you have them documented, then all you have to do is follow the documentation, right? You just follow that outline and you do whatever the process is. Another thing that we often see with processes is that they're not updated regularly. So one of the later steps on here is to do the weekly audits, and that's going to be to make sure that you have accurate data and that your processes are up to date. And then identifying your inefficiencies. So I know that we've talked about that, and there are a couple ways to do that. So you can conduct what's called a gap analysis, and then a root cause analysis. So when you're looking, and we have tools for this, we're not going to cover those in detail on this call, but if any of you are looking for, well, I would love to do root cause analysis, but I don't know how to do it, or, you know, I've tried to do root cause analysis before and didn't really work for me, right? Or we thought we had the right solution, but later the problem creeps up again. So if it's creeping up still, that means that you didn't find the root cause, right? You probably found a symptom. It's just like medicine, right? You go to the doctor when you have symptoms for something, and they're going to ask you questions and they're going to figure out what's causing those symptoms. So it's the same thing with your work environment. Back to those weekly audits, I cannot stress how pertinent it is for you to be doing weekly audits. And if this seems overwhelming to do weekly audits, like I can't even keep up with my job right now, right? Maybe don't do them weekly, maybe do them bi-weekly, maybe start out with once a month, right? Because if you don't have that established as a baseline, it's kind of like building a new habit. For someone who's never gone to the gym before or doesn't work out, you're not going to start going to the gym 6 or 7 days a week and consistently go to the gym 6 or 7 days a week. I love you, but you're not going to do it, right? I'm not going to do it. So you have to start out by building these things into your business in a way that it doesn't feel overwhelming, but it also serves you as well with where you're at. And it's not to put more like work onto people, but to make you guys better. Developing action plans with measurable objectives. So this goes back to the KPI, right? So if we have said problem and we know this is the solution, but we need to do 3 or 4 different things to get there. So we say, okay, Emily, I need you to take this action. I need you to contact this supplier and get X, Y, Z. Can you get it done by this date? Emily says, oh, let me take a look at my calendar. Yeah, I can do that, right? Or she's going to say, absolutely not. Like, I don't have the time this week to get that done, right? Give me until Friday instead, or give me until next Tuesday instead. So always make sure that you're going through with your team and you're developing these action plans to get them to their targets. And also have those conversations about like, are these actual, like, are these things that you can complete on your own? What help and support do you need? And don't wait until the day before it's due or the day that it's due and come and tell me that you didn't get it done because you needed more time, you needed this resource or that thing to happen, right? Have those conversations with your team and make sure you're periodically checking in with them. If you have daily meetings or weekly meetings, this is a great time to do that. So you can say, okay, Stan, where are you at on this action item? It's due next Friday. Like, what's your progress? Right? It's not for shaming or blaming. It's just to make sure that they have the support that they need. So make sure that you're asking, where are you at? What support you need? And then aligning your leadership and your teams. Like, this is huge. So another thing that we often see is transparency is a big deal. So oftentimes at the top, the leaders know what the goals and the targets are, right? They know the direction that the company is heading. But if you go one layer down, some of the people that work for them have no idea. They have no idea. And that is mind blowing to me because the CEOs and the C suite, they're not the ones doing all of these items, right? They're not the ones typically that are driving these direct results from these actions. So if you're not transparent and cascading down to everyone in the organization, no matter how big or how small it is, what are our goals? What are our objectives? What's our timeline? Like you have to be transparent with all of these things. And then you can also get that feedback. Like the team is going to tell you, okay, that's great. We love this. And we're, at this point on that item, right? Or they're going to tell you, I hate to say it, Stefan, but we're not going to get there in time, right? So you got to have those proactive conversations and make sure, of course, I'm picking on you, Stefan, but you've got to have these conversations and make sure that are the leadership goals in alignment with the team and the team goals. And the way that it should work is your team goals, like your lowest level employees or people, their goals should be rolling up into whoever they report to's goals. And those goals should be rolling up into and then they should just keep rolling up into until we have nowhere else to go, right? And if they don't align in this way, you are not going to hit your targets, right? So that's why you want to make sure that that alignment is happening. So the holistic tracking, it's the way to go. It's the wave of the future. I shouldn't be saying that it's the wave of the future. It should be what people are already doing, but I think we've kind of missed the boat with this in a lot of ways. So in order for you to have this competitive edge, you want to make sure that you're doing holistic tracking and that you're bringing the human factor in. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, but Julie, AI is going to take care of all of these things. It's not. It's going to take care of a lot of things. It's going to help to make our jobs easier in a lot of ways. But there are things that humans will always have to do, in my opinion, probably for the next 200 or so years. And I don't know about you guys, like, I don't want to be around for the next 200 years. Maybe some of you do, and that's totally cool, and you want to see this happen. Um, but again, it's ensuring that your alignment between your leadership, your operations, and your employees is all cohesive. Because if it's not cohesive, we're not moving forward, right? It's like some wonderful human that I was speaking to earlier this week said, if you're connecting two boxcars together and we don't have the right connection point, we're not going anywhere. But if we're connecting, if we have the right pieces in place, then we're moving together, right? This is going to help you build that resilient and engaged workforce. So I can promise you by doing these things, I've had people years and years later after they worked for me, like I moved on to other roles, and they came back up to me periodically and they're like, can you come back and be my boss? And I'm like, no, but what do you got? Like, what's going on? How can I help you? Right. So when you build that relationship with your team and when you're doing these things with your team, I promise you they are going to go through heaven and hell. They will move mountains for you. They will do the things that I've had people do for me and come up to me later and be like, you were the best boss that I've ever had. Please come back. Right. Like hearing that years later, I'm like, things must be real rough out there. I was really good at my job, which is it, right? But and this is always going to drive down the cost for you. So you're going to have cost savings in every area when you're doing this without sacrificing the things that are important, without sacrificing someone having to work when they're on vacation. I can't tell you the number of times that I got calls when I was not at work. And they're like, I need you to do this. And I'm like, well, did you go talk to my deputy? And they're like, well, yeah, but I'm like, well, yeah, but nothing. Like I'm on vacation. Talk to me about it tomorrow, right? Like things are not burning down, or if they're burning down, they can burn without me because I'm not there. But it's super, super frustrating and it's like really horrific for morale. I can't tell you the number of times that I wanted to quit working at some of those jobs. And I kept hearing this, like, oh, just stay for 5 years, then you're fully vested, right? Then you're fully vested. That was my carrot. That was the thing that kept me there. But we shouldn't have to have things like this in the jobs and in the roles that we're playing, in my personal opinion. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and then we will go through whatever questions you guys have and just answer those for you. You guys can feel free to unmute yourself and just ask whatever questions you guys have. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just come on here.
Well, it's the Ivy League thing in me, you know? I mean,
Oh, okay. Okay.
that's how we do it. We're polite.
Okay.
Raise
Oh,
our
okay.
hand. Okay. Not like we do it in a certain Midwest school, but hey, you know. Okay, so my question is, I get the leadership employee dynamic, but you had on that bullet point leadership operations and employees. And my question has to do with what if your systems and processes and operations are broken or kludgy or in some way they aren't set up in a way for employees and leadership to work together in alignment the way you're describing? Who's responsible for that and who takes ownership of that to fix it?
Yeah,
Do you want to go
so
or do you want me to go?
I'll take it, and then Julie, you can add your thoughts. So for me, it's the leadership's responsibility. And if you know your systems are not the way that they need to be, fix that before you start setting KPIs. And maybe that is part of your KPIs is to fix these broken systems that you have. The leadership is always responsible.
I second that. The leadership is absolutely always responsible because the employees are not, they're not going to be your drivers, right? You might have one or two people that are trying to drive things because it's a huge thorn in their side. Oftentimes, the only time the employees, who it is a huge thorn in their side, they're only driving because they are a self-led person. So if you have several people on your team who are rock stars but never want to move up, they're probably not going to bring it to your attention, right? Unless you ask them. So this is also where, for those of you who know what human design is, this is where human design plays hugely into what we do with companies. Because, and I'll speak for myself on this one, as a projector in human design, projectors wait for the invitation. So there's a side of me that would often wait, love to see that someone else is a projector, yay. But there was often a side of me, it's almost like I could hear myself screaming inside of myself to like say the answer, say the thing, like just raise your hand and say it, Julie, just raise your hand and say it, right? And there were times where I just wouldn't. And then I would kind of kick myself later because I was like, well, that was a brilliant thing and you should have said it, right? Or that could have been super helpful, but you didn't say it. But then there's also a part of me that is very ingrained in leadership. And it's like, I have to say it. It's like my soul is like, you got to say it. You just got to. But not everyone's going to be like that. So the leadership absolutely has to make that step, take that invitation and initiate with what they're doing and say, okay, this process obviously is not working, right? So, and if it's documented, then we look at the documentation and we look at the process and we see where are our gaps, right? And this is oftentimes a great way to have a meeting, pull some of your employees, whether they're on a shop floor or they're not, but pull your employees in, pull the people that work on the process or that do that thing every single day or multiple times a week or whatever it is. You're experts, right? In manufacturing, I hate to tell anyone here that is in this category, or anyone listening, engineers are not our experts. They are beautifully brilliant human beings and they can solve a lot of problems. But if they're not working in the process or doing the thing on a regular basis, they're not the expert. Okay. So you got to pull in the people that have that expertise and get a cohort together and talk through everything. They're going to tell you exactly what's working, what's not. And then you can document what happens in that meeting and then go from there. So then we make sure that it's accurate based on how the process actually works. So I'm one of those people that I'd go straight out there and be like, okay, show me. I've got what we've documented here. Show me step by step what you do. And I'm going to see, like, does it line up or does it not? That's going to show you what changes you need to make too. It's a great question. Did I answer everything full, or did we answer everything fully?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Emily, about your case study. So I'm not quite sure I understood it. So because I only went to an Ivy League school, but I thought what you said at the beginning was that the mandate was to save $1.5 million in employee cost. Okay, so that was, oh, sorry. And then there's two parts, there's two follow-on parts. Sorry. One is that I thought I heard you say that we weren't going to cut anybody today. We were going to cut people in the future, right? Which I guess, and I thought that was kind of clever if that's what you meant. And the third is that if your mandate was to cut employee costs, but you saved money through inefficiencies, right? Then does that count, or do they say thanks a lot, but you don't get credit for that? So I'm not quite sure I understood the case study.
And thank you for that feedback. I appreciate that. So the first part of it is with question one. So within a year, that's the cost savings that I had to do.
Right.
So looking into the future of like, oh, we're projected to bring in 20 head count. If I cut those now, that's cool, but I have to now go make all my processes efficient to justify not to bring that head count in.
Right.
So there was two sides of it. But what we found through tracking was the headcount wasn't being tracked all the way down to the department level.
Right.
And when you have these big departments, they're kind of just sneaking in these employees and nobody's really like, because the number is so huge that if you're off by 1 or 3, they're going to let it slide. So when you have that big of a plant that you're, managing, they're going to let it slide. But when you really get down to, you got to now track it. Give me the IDs, all of this, and then it holds them more to the fire to say, why do you have this role when you really don't have a position for them? So that was one side on the tracking. And then two, on through the process, through the headcount audits, we would go out and audit how many headcount was actually there. They didn't know who I was. I was just like, show me your process and show me your headcount and line it up. And so a lot of times it wouldn't line up, or there was this one person doing 3 different jobs saying, I got to do 3 different jobs because we're short here. And so it was really pulling in from a process audit perspective to see what are the inefficiencies, and then also holding the engineers to a KPI to get those inefficiencies fixed. Because once those inefficiencies fixed, now we've got the reduction on the inefficiency side, and we've also got the headcount reduction. So it was a mix of both, but we didn't have to cut jobs. Like I didn't have to go do a layoff. That was what I did not want to do, is the people that were already working there to have to lay them off, to know like, hey, I gotta cut you. And that's what didn't sit well. Now, through that process of the audits and listening to the employees, I then also took that data back to like the HR and the departments and the division of like, your employees are saying these things and we need to start listening. And then that tied into another project that I did through employee engagement.
Okay,
does that clear up with the headcount piece? Because I know it can be a little bit confusing. So the people that are working here today are in this bucket, right? And future forecast of 20 people is here. Right. So that forecast would have been 20 new people that would have been hired.
Right.
So instead of hiring all of those people, it was able to be brought down in that bucket, getting that savings.
And that's where you save the $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. And then you have to reconfigure the existing staff in order to maintain production and quality.
Correct.
Okay. Huh. That's clever. All right. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, because like she said, they're oftentimes sneaking people in. So if they don't have a way of tracking or the tracking system isn't followed, I had this happen all the time with one of my lines. On second shift, it would not, the line would not always run, but the supervisor would not move the people to the other departments that he put them in. So if like they're short on an oven and they're not running our line, so he'd say, okay, if you want to go home, you can. If not, you go to this oven. So if they went home, they clocked out, everyone's fine, right? But if not, they weren't moved over to the oven. So I actually had people ask me one day, like, why do you always ask us where we work? I'm like, because I'm the one who gets the ass beating for headcount and for my efficiency numbers. So if he's not moving you, and I explained the system to him, I'm like, when you guys badge in every day, you're coded to this place. This is your home. So if you're working here, great. If you're not working here, I'm getting charged for your time of working here. So it's going against my bottom line on this line. And if you're going over to the oven, it looks like their efficiency is beautiful because they're working with 3 less people when actually they're really not, because you went over there and worked. And he was like, oh, that makes so much sense now. He thought I was just being nosy and being in his business. And I'm like, nope.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
Yeah. So and some companies don't even track, and some companies don't have internal tracking systems, and some have gorgeous tracking systems, right? So it just kind of depends on where the company's at and what they do. Like when Emily's example, they weren't tracking that at that level.
Yeah, that's also interesting. I sort of noticed that when you started this case at Emily, it's kind of like, well, cut a specified amount of money from a department where it's not quite clear how much money they're actually spending. Right. So it's a little fuzzy. So okay, all right, interesting.
Yeah. And it can be very fuzzy, like you said, when you're going into these companies, if they don't have good tracking and they don't have processes in place, or their processes are not clear, accurate, and up to date. So do you want to speak into any software examples with that?
Yeah, I've got multiple ones. But one of the software examples is like, if they wanted, like they knew they were losing revenue, but had no idea like how much. And so really the goal for that was just like, clean it up. We don't care, just clean it up. Right. And so in 6 months, we ended up saving 6 months, we saved 2 million in that process. And basically what happened, there was no process in place. They were just leaking money. So no one was reconciling all the way down from the vendors to the partner to make sure that what the vendor was billing and then what they were billing the partner. They didn't have a process into place to ensure like the license counts and the usage. Hey, we're getting billed 30, but we're only billing the partner 20. And so it was really going in and putting that process in place and then starting to reconcile that on a monthly basis. And then when you look back, these vendors even knew it because, you know, I had to do the outreach to be like, hey, you know, we overpaid you and now I'm asking for like 300K back. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah, per your contract, you now owe us 300K. And so they were very like, how did you catch this? Because no one's
So they
caught
knew.
it. And this company's been around for almost 20 years. And so, and then all of a sudden, you know, I got the reputation of like, be careful because she's gonna catch it.
Okay. Wow,
But
that is,
yeah, so when, and it's, you know, it wasn't clear. They're just like, just get a read, like we need to make sure that we're saving, you know, money. And they didn't know. They had no idea that they were leaking that kind of revenue.
wow, interesting. Okay.
It's very eye-opening.
Oh,
Yeah.
the last, I have another question that makes me think. So this thing about the holistic, right? Is that a term of art in the industry, or is that something the two of you came up with?
I think it's both, maybe both. I don't know that we came up with the term holistic, but it has been mentioned in a lot of, I would say the first time I heard it, I think Forbes came out with the article, and maybe Haley, you want to speak into more like
Yeah, I was just gonna say
the
it's
whole
probably a Haley
holistic,
question.
kind of where the holistic language is coming into.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, the holistic and human-centered approach is what Forbes has announced that 2025 is all about human-centered and holistic. And holistic is simply exactly what we've been talking about, looking at the whole human, how they think, how they feel, their emotional intelligence, their human design, their energetics. There's so much more to a human than the current DEI programs that are out there, like, you know, ethnic background, gender, and sexual orientation. There's a lot more to a human than that, and that's where this holistic approach is coming from. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, not to get too political, but it looks like all the DEI programs are going away. So I don't know if that helps or hurts. Probably hurts.
I think ultimately it's going to hurt the companies
Yes.
hugely, hugely. They might not think so, or they might hope that it doesn't, but
Right. Yep.
and
So
I think we'll end up having another webinar on DEI at some point because that's a really big topic to dig into in and of itself. Did you have another question, Victor?
well, so we think of holistic. I guess when I think of holistic, I mean, like, you know, if like holistic wellness or something, you know, that applies to a person. I guess I just think of holistic as a crunchier acronym or crunchier synonym for comprehensive. So I guess I didn't normally associate it with being human centered, but more just so that's why I was curious as to, you know, what you.
So another way, like, to paint the picture about holistic would be to take a look at everything in its entirety, right?
Oh yeah, comprehensive.
So yeah, so if you're looking at, like, we have a job that we do, we have a company, right? We have money coming in, money going out. We have this process, this process, this process. Well, who does the process, right?
Right.
Who works the things?
Right.
But that's often the time or the piece that doesn't get looked at. That's why we're considering it holistic. And then you can think of it in terms of like holistic medicine or, you know,
Yeah.
anything like that too. So it's funny that you say crunchy. So yeah, but if we want to look at, you know, anytime you're doing a root cause analysis, no matter what the industry is, or if it's in medicine or if it's in business,
Right.
you have to look at every piece
Everything,
of the
sure.
puzzle, which is often not done.
Yep.
And I think, Stefan, did you have a question?
Yeah, but before I need to school my Ivy League colleague here a little bit. And Victor, it's from Eastern medicine. So holistic is they think of it in terms of the whole body, the chakras, the
Right.
7 chakras, right?
Uh,
So what business schools and management thought leaders took that term to mean the whole company, as it were,
Yeah.
right? So you're looking at all the functional areas of a business, and you're taking all of the, you know, the technical, the human, the financial, all that together
Right.
as a holistic. And I think that Julie and Emily are using it here to describe that integration between systems, processes, technology, and human, but emphasizing that the human piece of it is critical, especially between leadership and employee. How did I do?
Fabulous.
Yes,
Thank
me.
You could be our spokesperson.
Now, I don't want to be your spokesperson. So
Nothing
my
personal, I'm
question,
sure.
my question has to do with, since the pandemic, obviously we've had workforces that are remote, workforces that are hybrid, leaders that want everybody back in the office 5 days a week. And there's been pushback, there's been stress, there's been tension around that. And I wonder how your system would address that for a company to ensure that the high performers stick around, because high performers aren't going to stick around if they've become used to a particular way of working. They've sort of reoriented with their families. They're now much more involved with their kids and their kids' lives, and they find that they can still get their work done, actually be more productive, but it's harder for them to show because they're physically not there. So how
Yeah.
do you reconcile all that?
Okay, so I'll speak into this a little bit, and then I know this is near and dear to Emily's heart, so she'll have something to say about it too. From my perspective, this also definitely goes back to human design, because there are a lot of different aspects here. One of my aspects in human design, and I don't remember specifically what it's called, it's the marketplaces, like where I thrive, meaning I need to be like in community, right? Like I think sometimes it gets on Emily's nerves because I'm like, I just need to get on a call so we can like brainstorm and like walk through some things with me real quick. Just because that's the way I process better. And so to be on it, and as a projector, I also pull energy from other people. So to get that that piece of it, like this is where I think it's crucial that we look at the human design of all of the people that are here, because there are some people that it is going to be hugely beneficial for them to go back to the physical location, right? For them to be amongst their peers, and they're just going to thrive better that way. And then for some, it's not. And Emily, I'll go ahead and let you pick up here.
Yeah, so I would say for this, it's going back to look at the data and going back to also talk to the employees about it. So for example, I'm a manifester. I work very, very much best when I'm alone, zoned in, focused, don't interrupt me. No one's coming at my desk for this chit chat. Like I don't chit chat. I'm straight to the point. We're done. And very efficient because that's how I work. Now that also goes to I was the employee and I was also the leader of this employee, I would say, okay, here's your KPIs. You know, this is what the expectation is. And then to have those check-ins, whether it's weekly, whether it's bi-weekly or whatever it is, to make sure that they're still staying on task. And the way I also see it is with, especially those that there's no performance issue, if they can do their job and they can do it remotely, why would you not allow them to? Allow them to have that. If you're going to force them to go back into the office, you're probably going to look at some people, like Julie said, it's not going to affect. The other people, they're going to start job searching. You know, their stress level is going to go up and they're going to be snappier and they're not going to want to work. So they're just not going to work. They're going to do bare minimum. So if you can look at each employee and ask, can their role be remote? And if so, what process can we put in place? Give them KPIs for their current role, but also then challenge them to be like, hey, I would love to see you take on this project in the next 6 months. Like, let's work on a project to still develop you and grow you as a leader. So you're not just working remote and just being on like coast mode, right? So you also are, as a leader, get to decide what does that development look like for them. And there's tons of ways that you can do this. One of the simplest ways, like, hey, find something that's cost savings. Like, let's work on a project. Every single process has opportunity for like growth and to be better. And I think that as leaders, they just get to get creative, think outside the box, and know not all us humans function the same way or work the same way. And the same way with like working a Monday through Friday and 8 to 5. I think we're also going to see that shift because a lot of people, they don't function like that.
I'm one of those people. But that, I know Emily only has a couple more minutes and she has to hop off for a client call. But also to just kind of talk through that just a little bit more, I would put this back on the company and say, like, do you really value in your employees? Do you trust them? And so I think there's some deeper seated work to do. This is the part that some people get a little cringy about, right? Like there's some deeper seated work to do with trust. So if you're given the KPIs and they're hitting the KPIs, there's no issue. But if they're given KPIs, they're hitting the KPIs, and you're still thinking, I want you to come in. And they're like, I don't want to do that. What's the leadership issue, right? Like what is it within that leader or within that culture that gets to shift and gets to change to be more supportive and to be more proactive towards a better environment for their employees? Because I can also tell you that there's a lot of beautiful magic for some people in being able to be like, ooh, I have 10 minutes between a call. I can go grab something to eat really quick, or I can go throw in a load of laundry, or I can blah, 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 right? You can do so many things during your day when you're able to stay home and work. So I would encourage the employer to look at themselves and look like, what's the actual real issue here? Is it control for you? Is it trust for you? Or is there something else that's going on?
Great answers.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, then we will go ahead and close this out. Once I have the recording done, once it uploads, I will email it out to everyone who is on the call today, and everyone who is registered. So we appreciate you guys all for showing up, and you've had wonderful questions. They've been fantastic. So we appreciate you all for being here. And feel free to share this recording with whoever you want to, okay? Whoever you think it could benefit or it could serve them. And with that, we'll also send out our contact information. So if you guys want to book a call with us, you have more questions, or you're looking for support for yourself or for your company, let us know. We're here. Okay.
Great. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you guys.
Bye.